What if letting go was the bravest thing ever? Most people believe control is what keeps life together. But control is just fear wearing a confident disguise. You have been gripping so tight your hands ache. You have been planning every step, yet peace escapes. What if the answer was not effort, but trust? Today we are changing how you see absolutely everything. 6 powerful things happen when you fully trust God. These are not small shifts, they are life changes. By the end, you will never see trust the same way. Think about the last time you felt truly peaceful. Was it when everything went perfectly and nothing went wrong? Most people only feel peace when life fully cooperates. But that kind of peace is fragile and temporary, always. The moment one thing breaks, that peace completely vanishes fast. That is not the peace that God actually promises you. Philippians 4:7 describes a peace surpassing all human understanding. It does not make logical sense to the natural mind. It exists beyond reason, beyond circumstance, beyond what you see. It stands firm when everything around you is falling apart. When you trust God, something profound begins shifting inside you. Problems do not disappear, but they stop consuming your mind. You see the storm, but you're not swept away. You feel the pressure, but it no longer breaks you. You face the unknown, but fear no longer paralyzes everything. That steady calm becomes your new baseline every single day. You stop waking at 3 a.m. rehearsing every worry. You stop running worst-case scenarios on a mental loop constantly. Instead, you release those burdens one honest prayer at a time. And slowly, the weight you have carried for years lifts. This peace is not passivity, it is active trust. It's choosing to believe God is working right now, even when you see nothing moving and nothing seems changing. Even when the silence feels louder than any answer could, you begin resting in who God is, not your circumstances. The anchor drops deep, and your soul stops drifting aimlessly. Once you experience this peace, the world's version feels empty. No achievement, no relationship, no amount of money replicates it. It becomes the foundation that everything else in life rests upon. This is the first powerful gift of trusting God completely. Here's something nobody says out loud about control, honestly. Control feels like safety, but it's really just fear. We hold on tight because we're terrified of uncertainty. We plan obsessively because the unknown feels like falling endlessly. We overthink because our minds convince us that thinking protects everything. But Proverbs 3:5 cuts right through all of that clearly. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, completely now. Do not lean on your own understanding for final answers. That verse is not suggesting you live carelessly or passively, though. It's calling you toward a higher and wiser surrender. Letting go of control does not mean you stop acting. You still show up, work hard, and make wise decisions. But you stop forcing outcomes that were never yours to force. You stop chasing doors that God has already intentionally closed shut. You stop squeezing timelines that require seasons you have not lived. There's a difference between faithful effort and anxious, desperate striving. One is stewardship, and the other is fear driving everything forward. When you trust God, you begin learning to know the difference. You do your part fully, then release what you cannot control. That boundary between your role and God's role becomes beautifully clear. When that release finally happens, something unexpected follows you everywhere. You feel lighter, genuinely, physically, emotionally, and spiritually free. The pressure to figure out every detail begins fading gracefully away. You stop feeling responsible for outcomes only God can truly determine. And in that space, a quiet confidence begins growing steadily inside. Not arrogance, a settled knowing that God is handling everything. You become more patient because you are no longer running alone. You become more present because you are not lost in tomorrow. Letting go of control is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is one of the most courageous decisions you will ever make. Nobody signs up for difficulty, but difficulty is where faith grows. That is not a motivational phrase, that is a spiritual reality. James 1:3 says, "The testing of your faith builds perseverance always." And perseverance is not built in the easy, comfortable seasons of life. It is forged in the moments when everything feels impossibly hard. Before trusting God, trials felt like personal attacks against your life. They felt like evidence that something was deeply wrong with you. Every setback raised the same exhausting question: why is this happening? But when you trust God, that question begins to transform completely. You stop asking why and start asking what God is teaching. That single shift in perspective changes absolutely everything about hardship. Pain is no longer pointless, it becomes purposeful and productive. Frustration is no longer wasted, it becomes fuel for your growth. Seasons that once felt like punishment begin feeling like preparation for something. You start recognizing that every difficult chapter carries something valuable inside: greater patience, deeper wisdom, stronger faith, all hidden inside the struggle. And over time, you build a track record with God personally. You remember the times He carried you through what seemed impossible. Those memories become your evidence, and your evidence becomes your confidence. Your trust grows not because life gets easier, but through proof. The trials you once begged God to remove become your testimony. The very things you feared become the things that defined you. You look back and see His hand in every difficult season. You recognize the growth that only came through walking through fire. And that recognition becomes a well you draw from going forward. When the next storm comes, you are not starting from scratch. You carry the memory of every previous storm He brought you through. That memory becomes a weapon against the lies that fear tells. Faith does not grow in comfort, it grows in the furnace. And every time you trust God through trials, your foundation deepens permanently. The future is one of the greatest sources of human anxiety. It is unknown, and the unknown has a way of feeling threatening. We ask ourselves questions that have no answers in the present moment. What if things fall apart and my life goes completely wrong? What if I fail and everything I worked for disappears quickly? What if I make the wrong decision and cannot recover from it? These questions feel responsible, but they are really just fear speaking loudly. And fear never actually prepares you, it only paralyzes and exhausts you. Matthew 6:34 tells us not to worry about tomorrow at all, because today has enough of its own trouble to be handled. But there is something even more powerful in that same verse. God is already in tomorrow. He has been there before you. He is not waiting to see how things turn out eventually. He is not surprised by the uncertainties that feel so overwhelming to you. He is already at work in the outcomes you cannot yet see. When that truth settles into your spirit, everything begins to shift. You stop trying to predict and control every possible future scenario. You stop allowing what-if thoughts to hijack your present peace entirely. You stop letting the fear of tomorrow steal the beauty of today. Instead, you begin walking forward with a quiet and steady confidence. This does not mean you stop planning or caring about your future. Wisdom still requires that you think ahead and make responsible choices always. But there is a massive difference between planning with faith and planning with fear. Planning with faith says, God will guide my steps as I go. Planning with fear says, I must control every outcome or everything collapses.
One produces momentum, and the other produces paralysis and exhaustion, always. When you trust God, the future stops feeling like something to survive. It starts feeling like something you are walking into together with Him. You move forward not because you have all the answers figured out. You move forward because you know the one who holds them all. Trust and obedience are two sides of the very same coin. You cannot truly trust someone and then refuse to follow their direction. And you cannot truly obey someone you do not actually trust yet. Isaiah 1:19 says that if you are willing and obedient, you will eat well. That means alignment with God's direction produces results that striving alone never could. When you trust God, you become more sensitive to His voice daily. You begin recognizing His direction through Scripture and through quiet inner conviction. And instead of hesitating out of fear, you begin responding with courage. Sometimes obedience looks like stepping into something completely new and unfamiliar. Other times it looks like releasing something comfortable and deeply familiar to you. It might mean forgiving someone when every part of you resists it. It might mean choosing integrity when compromise would be so much easier. It might mean walking away from something good for something far greater. Obedience in those moments is never easy, but it is always worth it. And every act of obedience deepens your trust in a very real way. Because every time you step out and God shows up, you remember this truth. His direction is never meant to restrict or diminish your life at all. It is always meant to lead you towards something better and fuller. The path He chooses is not the easiest one, but it is the best. And the more you follow, the more your trust is confirmed and strengthened. There is also a beautiful pattern you begin to notice over time. Every season of obedience opens a door that disobedience would have kept closed. Every step you take in faith unlocks a provision you could not see before. God does not ask for your obedience to test your willingness to suffer. He asks for it because He can see what you cannot see yet. He sees the open door 3 steps ahead that fear is blocking from view. He sees the blessing waiting on the other side of that difficult yes. Trust makes you willing to obey, even when you cannot yet see why. And obedience confirms that your trust is not just words, but a real decision. Together, they move you into the life God has been preparing for you. Ephesians 3:20 says God can do immeasurably more than all we ask. That verse is not a motivational quote to put on a coffee mug. It is a living promise that requires your trust to fully activate. But here's the problem. Our need for control limits what we believe for. When we demand to see the entire plan before we take one step forward, nothing moves. We stay stuck in safe, predictable, self-managed lives that never fully open up. We call it wisdom, but it is really just faithlessness dressed up in practicality. When you release control, you create space for God to truly move powerfully. And what He does in that space is beyond what you could have planned alone. Doors open at the exact right time from the most unexpected directions. Opportunities appear from places you never would have thought to look yourself. Connections are made that logic could never have engineered or manufactured on its own. Circumstances shift in ways that carry His fingerprints all over them clearly. And you begin to develop eyes that recognize His hand in things you once overlooked. The small provisions you used to call coincidence, you now call faithfulness instead. The narrow escapes you once called luck, you now trace back to His protection. Your awareness expands and your gratitude deepens with every passing season you live. What once felt impossible becomes a testimony you share with others who need hope.
What once caused sleepless nights becomes a reminder of His unchanging and proven faithfulness. Trusting God did not hold you back. It unlocked something you could not unlock yourself. Trusting God completely changes the entire landscape of your inner life. It brings a peace that remains firm even when life feels uncertain.
It frees you from the exhausting and endless need to control everything. It builds your faith stronger through trials instead of letting trials break you. It removes the fear of the future and replaces it with confidence. It leads you into obedience that aligns your whole life with God's will, and it opens your eyes to see God moving in extraordinary, unexpected ways. Your life does not suddenly become perfect when you choose to trust fully, but it becomes grounded, purposeful, and no longer driven by fear daily. You stop being controlled by anxiety and start being anchored by faith completely.